In Billy Ferguson's bedroom, there were 3 shredded arms and various disemboweled body parts scattered randomly on the floor next to his Hot Wheels cars, Star Wars toys, and Nintendo Switch controllers. The white Super Mario carpet was stained with blood from the limbs, and one of the legs was still twitching on the ground. Dylan Cronkeith's head was staring at Billy with lifeless eyes. Billy was crying and huddling his knees on the bed, surrounded by the gruesome scene. He could hear growling and bone-chewing sounds coming from under the bed, but he wasn't sure if it was Dylan's bones or Hector's, who was also staying over. Billy's older brother Danny had always told him that a monster lived under his bed, and now it seemed like he was right. Danny was 6 years older than Billy and loved to torment him with scary stories and pranks. He had convinced Billy that all sorts of crazy things would happen if he did certain things, like jumping out of the bathtub too slowly or eating candy. Billy would always fall for it and give Danny all his snacks and treats, but he eventually caught him smoking cigarettes and told their mom. Danny got grounded for a month, and Billy got to have a sleepover with his friends Dylan and Hector. Their mom bought them pizza, junk food, and soda, and they had free range to watch almost anything on Netflix, Prime, and Hulu. Billy was finally winning in the house, and Danny was low man on the totem pole. Billy, Dylan, and Hector continued to play on the Nintendo Switch until they grew tired and decided to go to sleep. As they settled in for the night, Danny warned them again about the monster under Billy's bed. Dylan was visibly scared, but Billy and Hector reassured him that it was just Danny trying to scare them. Hours later, Dylan woke up to a strange smell coming from his foot. He looked around the room and saw the empty pizza boxes, candy wrappers, and soda cans on the dresser. He then noticed Billy's spinning night light casting neon-colored superhero silhouettes around the room. As he was about to fall back asleep, a low growling sound woke him up again. Dylan sat up and looked at Billy's bed, where the growling sound was coming from. He tried to get Billy and Hector's attention, but he didn't want to be too loud. The growl sounded again, and Dylan's heart raced as he trembled with fear. He even wet himself due to the terror he felt. Despite his fear, Dylan suddenly had a strong desire to see what was under the bed. He wanted to prove to himself that he was braver than his friends thought. With shaking hands, he slowly lifted Billy's comforter to reveal what was underneath. Dylan nervously got close to the bed to investigate and prove that there was nothing scary under there. He took a deep breath and lifted the comforter, but instead of seeing an empty space, he saw a set of sharp, foaming teeth the size of iPads or tablets. Dylan froze with fear and was unable to speak. Just as he was about to scream, 2 reptilian clawed hands emerged from under the bed and grabbed him, pulling him in as the mouth opened wide, and began devouring him. Hector suddenly woke up to the horrific scene and saw the razor-sharp teeth, slithering lips, and lizard-like hands grabbing his friend. His screams woke up Billy, who was also paralyzed with fear at the sight of Dylan's lifeless body. "Quick, get on my bed," Billy screamed at Hector, who quickly followed Billy's lead and jumped onto his bed for safety. Hector tried to follow Billy's lead by jumping onto the bed, but unfortunately, he didn't make it very far. The reptilian hands grabbed him, split his body in half, and devoured him, leaving more blood, guts, intestines, and body parts behind. Billy was now alone, sitting on his bed, hugging his knees in terror. The reptilian hands slowly slithered back under the bed, leaving behind only the sound of bones being chewed on. Billy looked around his room and at the door, wondering if he could make a run for it. He knew he was terrified, but he also knew he had to do something. Slowly, he got up from his bed, taking a few hesitant steps towards the door. Billy knew that he had to move quickly, no matter how scared he was. He figured that if he ran hard and fast, he could make it out of the room and to safety. The scaly, clawed hands were nowhere to be seen, but he could still hear the creature under his bed chewing on bones and flesh. Billy crouched up on his feet in his bed, trying to remain calm and conserve his energy. He needed to get off the bed, turn the doorknob, and run out of the room. He kept playing the scenario in his head, trying not to choke when it was time to make a move. With one last deep breath, Billy raised himself out of bed, jumped to the floor, and sprinted to the bedroom door. He could feel his heart pounding against his chest, but he kept running, determined to escape the horrors that lay beneath his bed. He opened the door and started to leave the room, but was suddenly grabbed by a scaly hand and pulled to the ground. Billy felt disoriented, and his vision was blurry from hitting his head. The pain, fear, and exhaustion overwhelmed him, and he wanted to cry. A monstrous head resembling a lizard slowly emerged from under the bed. Its yellow eyes had glowing red pupils, and sharp teeth were covered with saliva and white foam. The creature began dragging Billy towards its open mouth, causing him to scream for help. The sound of a familiar voice stopped the monster in its tracks. Billy painfully turned around to see Danny in the doorway. Danny commanded the monster to let Billy go, and it obeyed by quickly retreating back under the bed. "I didn't anticipate it would go that berserk," Danny said. Billy, on the other hand, broke down in tears. "That creature killed my friends. They're all dead," he said, trying to distance himself from the gruesome remains of his friends. Danny entered the room and knelt down next to his younger brother. "We used to move around a lot before you were born. When I was younger, I could control it. Mom and Dad thought it was some kind of divine intervention, or the work of the devil, which I didn't understand. But I could make things happen just by thinking about them. For your sake, I stopped using this power. Mom and Dad didn't want me to scare them anymore, and that's why Dad left. But Mom begged me to control it, so I promised her I would. As you grew up and gained more attention, you became a threat to me, and it stirred something deep inside me. However, I was still able to control it somehow. Don't ask me how," Danny said, looking at his brother with honest yet crazed brown eyes. A frightened Billy asked Danny, "If you were in control, then how did this happen tonight?" To which Danny replied in a calm but withdrawn tone, "When you grounded me, something took over me." He then appeared embarrassed by the situation, but suddenly smiled. "At first, I was afraid of what was happening to me. But then I realized what I could do with this power, and what I could do to people who tested me. You were my first test subject when I decided to let go. I would never hurt you or Mom, but everyone else was free game," Danny confessed to Billy. This revelation left Billy even more disturbed than before. Danny was now a stranger to him, and he didn't know who was in his room anymore. Danny proceeded to tell Billy that Dylan and Hector were expendable, and they didn't matter. The family had to move several times in the past, due to Danny's gift affecting their living situation. It was time to pack up again because Dylan and Hector's parents would start asking questions, and the authorities would get involved. Danny suggested that Billy start packing anything he wanted to bring because they had to leave as soon as their mom finished her shift at the hospital. As Billy looked at his older brother, all he could think was that he was no longer the person he knew. Danny had become committed to embracing his dark power to create monsters, which meant danger for anyone who crossed his path. Billy knew this to be true after witnessing the deaths of Hector and Dylan at the hands of the monster under his bed. With a heavy heart, Billy started packing his things, knowing that he had to leave with Danny before things got worse. He couldn't leave his brother alone, despite what he had become. As they left the room, Billy took one last look at the monster that had caused so much pain and destruction. He wondered if they would ever be able to escape the newfound reality they were facing, where the person he loved and trusted the most had become a monster himself.